Good evening.
Good evening.
It is May the 27th. It is 5:31 p.m. This is a called meeting of the Spencer Board of Aldermen, and called meeting for the purpose of considering our recommended or a presentation on the recommended budget for FY 21-22. So with that, if you'll please bow for a pledge of allegiance or for an invocation. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this town. We thank you for all those who serve it. We thank you for leadership opportunities. We thank you for granting us wisdom and guidance. We ask that you be with us as we receive these budget recommendations. Grant us wisdom and discernment that we may approve a budget for the next fiscal year that is supportive of our citizens, and will continue to benefit and grow our town. Amen. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so at this time, we will receive a budget presentation from town staff for fiscal year 2021-2022 per North Carolina General Statute 159-12. Mr. Franzese, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Williams and members of the Board of Aldermen. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight with the staff to present our recommended budget for the coming fiscal year. Of course, one of the primary responsibilities of a town manager is to recommend a balanced budget to the board for your consideration. And that's what this is. This is our best recommendation, and it's then up to you to take it and deliberate with it and receive public input. The schedule going forward is that tonight we're going to introduce this to you. Next week, at the pre-agenda meeting on Thursday, there will be an opportunity for any workshop needs if we need to talk about any particular items or go into anything further, or to just go over things. And then we have a public hearing scheduled for the regular meeting on Tuesday, June 8th. And then the board is free to adopt a budget at any point following the public hearing, but before the end of June. And of course, this would take effect July 1 and carry through the following June 30 of 2022. And so with that, we're going to go over the recommendation tonight, and can certainly ask questions and stop me if needed, but the intent again is to introduce you to this recommendation and start your process of discerning what's the appropriate budget for the coming year. I do want to start off by thanking you all for your guidance and leadership in terms of providing direction to staff through your strategic plan and our earlier discussions leading up to this. And certainly I thank our entire staff leadership team for their efforts in putting this proposal and recommendation together through their departmental requests, and in particular our finance officer Faith Wilson and our town clerk Stacy Craven worked very closely with me in putting this together and getting it to this point. And so the bottom line up front is that next year we recommend an operating budget of about $3.8 million with a general fund of $3,721,314 and a Powell Bill Fund of about $102,000. We also recommend establishing some additional funds. We recommend establishing a capital reserve fund of $300,000 to $400,000 to designate some of the town's current savings for current and future capital investments. This fund would be further programmed through a separate capital improvement plan in the coming year. We also see the opportunity to set up some special revenue funds to administer the approximately $950,000 in the Federal American Rescue Plan funding that's slated to come our way, as well as for the $750,000 CDBG Neighborhood Revitalization Grant that we're going to be administering over the coming years. The recommendation before you does maintain the tax rate at the 65.5 cent rate per $100 of valuation. And this recommendation represents the balance of the fact that we've made progress on a lot of the goals and strategies you've set out, but that we do have work to do. But we've come a long way in the midst of the global pandemic that's affected Spencer and beyond. So we continue through this budget to focus on several key areas in your strategic plan. And from an overall sense, this budget is based on the really where we are right now in our current fiscal year, that revenues have come in better than we expected. A year ago, things were not looking too good. We were expecting a lot of declines in sales taxes, major impacts in that area, and things turned out to be much better in the current year than what we expected. And at the same time, the town's also taken some big steps on some key priorities in terms of retaining and recruiting and retaining a talented and professional staff. You adopted a pay plan earlier this year that really gets our pay structure where it needs to be. We've taken a step in implementing that. This budget recommendation completes that process through full implementation of the pay plan with the whole year's worth of funding, including the developmental increase process. And we've also made progress in the town hall and police department construction project. We're halfway through with that construction. Our debt service for that is going to come due in the next fiscal year, and we estimate that to be about $160,000 every year for the next 30 years. That will be an expense for the town. So, that's kind of takes it right off the top, right? We got to do that first before we get to anything else. And so we do anticipate, though, based on the current projections, that we will end this year by having about $270,000 to contribute into our fund balance based on revenues over expenditures. And we recommend appropriating that amount into the following year's budget with a modest amount above that 270. And we believe that is what it will take to allow us to maintain and expand our current level of services, as we'll get into with more detail. Before we get into the expenditures, I'd like to turn it over to Faith and let her go over some of the revenues in detail with you so you can understand how we put those together.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
What I did as far as compiling some revenues, basically I had to go back and look at some prior years, and I come up with some spreadsheets for the sales tax and then for some of the other taxes that we get, and I base it off of, well, let me back up. On the sales tax, I took what we've gotten over the course of from fiscal year 2017 to fiscal year 2021, just to kind of see how we had done over the years, and compiled a spreadsheet for that. And based off of what the North Carolina League of Municipalities is saying that we'll get this year, I took their percentage and took what we got last year, because they said between last year and this year we would have like a 13% increase in growth as far as sales tax. So I figured up what we got last year, took that 13% and said, okay, this is what we should estimate at the end of this year to be for this fiscal year 21. And so they projected that we would get another increase in the sales tax between this fiscal year and fiscal year 2022 of like 2%. So I took about what we would probably end up with this year, added another 2% to be able to forecast what we would project for next year. And so that's how I kind of come up with the sales tax. I looked over several years of what we had gotten in, based it off of the league's percentages of growth that they said we would get. And so that's how I kind of was able to get a ballpark idea of what the sales tax would be. As far as the, property tax and vehicle tax for the Avalarum, that comes in from the county, and so their estimate is pretty much what we have to go by. So that's how I come up with that number. As far as the prior years, to get an estimate on prior year's property tax, I did base that off of a 5-year average. So I went back, looked over about 5 years, and did an average to be able to come up with those numbers there. And every year it's been real consistent, as far as what we've gotten in as to what has been budgeted. And we did the same thing on the other fees that we charge as far as revenues for, like, first responder fees, court fees, zoning fees, and lien payments. I just based everything off of a 5-year average to be able to put an estimate there.
So those are some of the overall trends on revenues. And one other thing I want to point out in this recommendation is we do suggest that it's time for Spencer to take advantage of a revenue source that Spencer has not before. In North Carolina, local governments, municipalities are authorized to levy what's called a municipal vehicle tax, and that is a flat tax on each vehicle that is paid through the vehicle registration process. So currently, if you go to renew your license plate, register a vehicle, you pay everything to the North Carolina DMV. Part of what you pay to them over the last several years, they call it tax and tag together, includes local property taxes. So that same 65.5-cent tax rate on your real estate or real property, you also pay on a vehicle, but that is collected through the DMV process, and that is across the board. That's something that happens everywhere. But municipalities also have the ability to add the vehicle tax. At one point, it was limited to $5 per vehicle, and several years back, the General Assembly increased that amount to a max of $30. But any amount above that $5 was restricted in the use. And if you operate a transit system, there's some funding that could be directed towards that. Otherwise, any amount of the $5 above the $5 is required to be directed the same way as Powell Bill towards street maintenance. And so over the past few years, we've seen a decline in our Powell Bill revenues as people are having more efficient cars, driving less through the pandemic. The Powell Bill revenues have gone down over the last few years, and we're projecting that they're going to go down about $10,000 over the coming year. Well, through a $10 vehicle tax, Spencer can generate, based on our estimate of 2,000 vehicles, that would give $10,000 for the general fund and $10,000 for the Powell Bill to make up for what we're seeing in Powell Bill declines, and also to help us provide street maintenance and other services to vehicle owners. So that is part of this recommendation. I talked a little bit about the fund balance and capital reserve earlier. Part of what we suggest is that out of the capital reserve fund you would establish, that we would appropriate about $185,000 of that into next year's operating budget to begin for things like planning for fire station addition, doing a lighting conversion at the existing station, doing some vehicle purchases in police and public works, and also a variety of technology upgrades that will help us serve the community better and be more efficient. The estimated undesignated general fund balance that would remain if these transfers take place as recommended would be between 1.3 and 1.37 and $1.47 million. We also do recommend a few changes to the fee and use schedule. That is part of this document. It is available as Appendix A, which starts on page 32. And what you see in the fee schedule is a revised version concerning subdivision plats, zoning review, historic district review. This comes out of the process we just worked with Focus on the development ordinance, and these were staff's recommendation after having some recommendations from the consultant. We actually lowered some of the recommended fees considerably based on our analysis of current fees and others in the area. So that is the most significant change to the fee schedule, but it is available in there for your review as well. Any questions about revenues before I go on?
Mentioned the fee schedule. My understanding, there may have to be a slight modification to what's proposed in this packet.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so it actually came to our attention today. Our code enforcement remedial action program, the ordinance that authorizes that refers to if somebody is, if there is a property that is registered to be under the purview of that remedial action program, there is to be a registration fee as part of that authorized in the fee schedule. We did not see any specific language in the fee schedule related to that. However, when I look at page 34 under nuisance abatement, there is an administrative fee of $175. The ordinance says that the fee for the rental remedial action administration or registration can be no more than $500 per year. And so what I would recommend is we actually just do some editing on our category. And so instead of saying nuisance abatement, we would say nuisance abatement and remedial action program registration. And then it would say, just as it does, administrative fee $175, and to keep that consistent in both cases. Any other questions about revenues?
I just paid my vehicle tax for this year. So how will we collect, when will that go into effect for new registrations?
It would take effect July 1.
Okay.
And so all the registrations that we receive from July through June of next year would include that in the registration.
So it will come in on a graduating,
We receive those on a monthly basis from, the county receives them from the state and then passes them on to us.
Yes, they do. We get it by check. The county sends us a check, and they send us a breakdown of the vehicle. Well, it's a breakdown that shows the property and the vehicle, and it also, I noticed, others that are already doing the vehicle fee. It lists out, like, it'll say vehicle fee, and then it tells you how many vehicles it collected on that month, and then gives you the dollar amount. So we kind of estimated about 2,000 vehicles in the town. I mean, give or take, it could be more, it could be less, but
That was
possibly a little more.
that was a conservative
being
estimate.
conservative on that.
so will we send notices to people, or will that just come with their renewal fee?
It would come when they get their registration renewal from the state. It would be listed, and we have to check with the state. There may even be more of a lag in their ability to, because I know, for example, somebody who's due in July, they probably already gotten their renewal notice. So there could be some lag in that in terms of the implementation of it. But we're of course gonna inform the community of the budget this year. But the actual notice would come on the vehicle registration.
Be on vehicles that are tagged, what about trailers, things like that? Is that part of it too?
I don't know if folks pay a trailer wouldn't have an annual renewal, I don't believe. I'm looking back to the police chief to see if, do trailers have an annual renewal on the license?
Well, depends on the county, you have to pay a renewal fee on a trailer tag unless you get a multi-year. Then you pay the fee once. Most of my trailers have that.
But
A lot of people don't, so they do it every year.
my understanding, this is a motor vehicle tax. So my understanding is, and we have to get clarification, is that it wouldn't apply to accessories like a trailer. It has to be, that it's just the actual motor vehicle.
I think if we currently would collect the property tax at the 65 rent on something, then this would apply to it. I would imagine, but, yes, we can certainly clarify that. Okay, so to summarize our personnel highlights in the upcoming budget, I did mention already about taking the next step with our pay plan and full implementation of that with developmental increases. This budget also recommends a holiday bonus to be paid in December, which would provide a lump sum equal to 1.25% of annual pay for each full-time staff member, and a flat sum of $300 for each eligible part-time staff. Volunteer and part-time fire and reserve police staff have some specific eligibility requirements for that, which is outlined in the personnel policy handbook. We recommend continuing our excellent benefits package, which we have found to be very important in one of our best tools for recruiting and retaining a talented and professional staff. And so we recommend continuing with the way we've had that structured for staff. And then in terms of positions, a few changes that we're recommending, and you can actually see a chart towards the end of the package on page 35, which is a staffing summary. But we are recommending enhancing our police staffing on patrol through the reallocation of the vacant lieutenant position, which was the former first sergeant position, and adding one additional position. This would allow for 4 officers on each of our 2 patrol squads rather than the current 3. It'll avoid situations of an officer working alone during part of the shift and better facilitate their ability to attend training. We also are recommending expanded part-time staffing in the fire department. Currently, part-time firefighters are working 8-hour day shifts and 11-hour night shifts, and so we have a gap in paid coverage during a portion of the early evening. And this recommendation shifts to 12-hour shifts covered by part-time staff, 2 at day and 1 at night. And that would be complemented by volunteers and what we call live-in volunteers. We recommend a flat per night stipend for our live-in volunteers, which would have a progressive pay rate per night according to their certification levels, and eliminating the per call stipend for other volunteers. And so those are some of the changes we're recommending to our staffing, which is on the whole very significant, but at the same time somewhat minimal, not a whole lot of staffing level changes there.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, you and I had talked about potentially looking into cost on staffing would be not a human staffing person, but a canine for our police department, specifically for a focus on drug intervention.
Yep.
And do we have any rough estimate of cost on that?
We do. I need to pull up the right place here, and I can tell you the estimate. Okay, so what yeah, we could just let Charlie do it. And what do you think, Chief James?
Great.
All right. So Chief James did look into this, and we've identified an upfront cost of about $23,500. That would be for the dog itself and equipment. There would be an additional cost that's some of the equipment. That does not include the cost of, for example, a kennel at the officer's residence, but that would include, to be more specific, a single-purpose dog just for drug recognition would be $8,500. The cost to upfit our vehicle with a in-vehicle kennel and heat alarm and other equipment would be $15,000, one-time cost. And so then we estimate about $3,000 annually on top of that for maintenance, nutrition, care, veterinary care, and also insurance. And that's both police liability, and also you can put insurance on the dog itself. So if something were to happen to the dog, there would be some support for the town through our insurance program.
And Chief, that vehicle upfit cost, is that assuming, is it any different between upfitting a brand new vehicle versus an existing one?
It's a little bit more, but not a great deal. For instance, if we got the Durango vehicle that's in there, then we would just upfit it with the kennel and the heat alarm. And I would recommend your vehicle for a K9, because in the summer you could lose a dog if your air fails. So
Yep.
I think that's important. So, the 15,000 is a ballpark. Prices seem to be continuing to escalate, but I think that's a pretty good estimate of what it would cost.
And for the board's information, the background behind the request is that we've seen an uptick, not just our community, but really across the board in drug activity. And I think one of the realities is some of it starts at an early age. And so the ability to have a dog that we could periodically have in our schools, it would be helpful. Right now, I know that the local schools rely on the sheriff's department, and there can be anywhere from a 2-week plus lag in when they can actually get a dog in there. And so at that point, really doesn't do any good. The other thing is, I know with our officers on patrol, with some of the traffic stops that they make, from a safety standpoint, rather than having to search vehicles, an initial screening by a dog is a lot less intrusive for our citizens, as well as a lot safer for our officers as well. So it's definitely a hefty cost to it. But what I'm almost wondering is if it's something that, the town could consider budgeting for a portion of that, whether that be the dog and annual care, and then we look for some type of grant opportunity for a vehicle upfit to fund part of that. So I appreciate y'all checking on it, and definitely something I'd like the board to take under advisement, just be thinking about. Anything else on personnel?
Is the change in the way that we pay the volunteer firemen, is that gonna have any impact at all on the volunteers? Will they like it better, or will they continue to volunteer?
So the issue currently is the volunteer fire services practically went away. I currently have about 6 on my roster, 2 of which will actually respond to calls. So that's why we're trying to kind of slowly make that transition to a combination or a majority paid department to where it's reliable help. I have 2 volunteers, like I said, that are reliable. One is my deputy chief, and one is an 18-year-old senior in high school. Obviously, the senior is unable to participate in any firefighting activities, and the deputy chief's kind of the same thing. He's more of a command presence than he is an actual active firefighter. So to say we rely on our firemen, unfortunately, I think the truth of that is our calls would go unanswered. So kind of reallocating that money towards the part-time staff in terms of coverage in the town, I think that's the best thing we can do moving forward. So, absolutely.
Of course, we did talk to the board previously about the opportunity for the SAFER grant. And that is federal dollars that can allow us to improve our staffing with full-time staff. We hope to look into that for this year, but we found that we were not prepared at this point to pursue that grant, but the fire department is working towards doing that in the future, and I'm hoping in the cycle that comes in the coming year, we'll be able to pursue that and be able to build our capacity through that grant opportunity, because it's I think it's a big one out there.
I'll say I commend you all for working through this and trying to make sure that we're providing right level staffing for our departments. Glad to see we're able to add some positions to beat those up.
Okay, what I would like to do is I'm also gonna go over some highlights in each of our departments about what this budget is recommending, and there's actually quite a few that we're recommending within the governing body's budget. And of course, one of the things we want to do is continue support of key partner agencies like our local EDC, the Cabarrus-Rowan MPO, Central Island Regional Council, the North Carolina League of Municipalities, and the UNC School of Government. We're recommending the launch of a vintage sign restoration program. We have some murals around town that, if you look at them, they're pretty interesting, and they look like they could use a coat of paint or so to bring them back. And the other places have been successful in dedicating some funding to this and identifying an artist to breathe these vintage signs, or some people call them ghost signs, back to life. It kind of some of them have become destinations. You see people standing in front of them taking pictures, and so that's something we're recommending that's new. We also have a recommendation to reimagine the current facade grant program with two new programs. One that would be focused on commercial properties and one focused on residential properties. So this would be a $20,000 total grant program. $10,000 would go towards a new Main Street corridor improvement grant. It would offer assistance for facade and storefront improvements to commercial properties along the Salisbury Avenue corridor and within the downtown core area, and it could be administered by the Community Appearance Commission.
Go all the way down to the town limits.
So the specific guidelines are kind of in the works, so nothing is certain or final yet. I don't know if Kyle wants to chime in on some of the
Yes.
thought with the.
I think that the idea here is that we want to make sure that this program can benefit most of the commercial properties on Salisbury Avenue. We need to make sure, I'll develop a map identifying the eligible properties. It may be that it'll go all the way to the Salisbury border, but I'll tailor it to make sure that it hits all the properties that we really want to see an improvement on.
And then the other part of that would be a new $10,000 historic preservation grant that could aid residential homes, both within the historic district, but also older homes with deferred maintenance needs, even if they're outside of the district. It could focus on exterior repairs, replacement of deteriorated materials and elements, and the thought is that this could be administered by the Historic Preservation Commission. We also recommend continued support of local tourism and events, including the marketing support that the board already directed. We included in this budget for the North Carolina Transportation Museum, a total of $12,000 recommended in the budget for tourism and events in the coming year.
Is that enough for events?
Well, that's for the transportation museum.
No, I think.
Or is it included?
I think it's included, so that
Oh,
would be
okay.
like the $2,500.
This year,
Well,
this
we'll
year, this year there was $10,000 in the budget for events, and so this recommends increasing that to $12,000 to include the amount for the Transportation Museum.
Yes, I'm just thinking, I mean, just thinking to the estimate for like our June event, what we were talking about.
Yeah.
It'd be tight.
That's what I'm thinking.
It's a little
Because
tight.
we initially had talked about having contingency, and the board's, and the contingency has been decreased in this budget, I believe. And so that's why I'm asking if,
Right. Yeah. So maybe that's something you flag for discussion during our work session next Thursday. Yeah.
Okay, so to move into the administration budget unit, one thing I'll note is that this budget folds what was previously a separate land management budget into a single budget called administration. And some highlights include, not that it's all funded within the administration budget, but it's categorized here. The amount for our developmental increase program across all departments for the coming year would be about $46,000. So just to give you the figure of what it costs to take that next step with our pay plan and continue growing that for our staff. We've programmed a number of technology improvements totaling just under $23,000. Software to improve our purchasing, budget, and financial reporting, to provide electronic time and attendance methods. We currently have departments who are sending in paper timesheets in different formats, and our finance staff has to take that and get it all into the finance system manually. And there's software that can automate this and provide better two-way communication, save a lot of time for staff and let them focus on other tasks, and also do things like allow our staff to be able to check leave balances, request time off through supervisors. We also would have an employee portal where we can put forms and messages. So just to tell you a little bit more about that. We're also recommending some software to develop an online plan review and permitting process, also code enforcement and public works issue tracking, which would also have a citizen communication component, where we could actually have a text messaging type communication system built into that with our citizens.
would that be something that you could use to contact all the citizens in the community if there was a need? Is that-
It would, so it is, this software that I'm talking about, it would not come with, it's not a mass notification system that comes with a data set. Now the county actually has that kind of software in place that in case of emergency, that's something that's usable, but this is something where we encourage people to give us their contact information through this system so we can communicate with them. Again, the debt service on starting our USDA loan payments, about $160,000. We're recommending the comprehensive plan, land use plan update to guide development in town over the next 20 years. We estimate that would be about $40,000 to have that process. We're recommending additional planning service hours from our partners at the Salisbury Community Development Corporation to average 3 days a week. That would be an increase of about $15,000. And our full-time lead for North Carolina Fellow that we've talked with you about would start in August. That is a program that actually has the cost mostly subsidized, but would have a local cost mostly for training needs of about $17,000. That amount covers training and health insurance for the fellow, and most of the other costs are actually subsidized through the program. In police, I talked about a new position. The cost of a new position for salary and benefits. We estimate at about $55,000. Increasing the amount of funding we have for training, equipment, and safety and medical kits, total of about $10,000. We're recommending to increase in those areas. Providing town-issued mobile phone service for our officers. We've got a lot of officers who are using personal cell phones to conduct town business, and we should be either paying those officers a stipend or providing them a town-issued phone. And we've done a little analysis and determined that it is more cost-effective to provide them a town phone. We estimate it would be about $9,000 to do this for our police officers. We also want to continue with our vehicle replacements in police and replacing one patrol vehicle to include cameras and other equipment. We estimate at about $49,000. In the fire department, we've talked about the staffing. So what we described to continue our transition to a combination department and increase part-time hours, the part-time coverage, we estimate to be about $75,000. We also want to provide adequate uniform, safety, and personal protective equipment for our fire department staff. I believe currently our volunteers through over the past few years, they receive a t-shirt.
So our volunteers and even our paid staff don't receive anything uniform-wise other than 2 t-shirts. So obviously I expect them to look professional, but we don't provide the means for them to do that. So that's what that initiative would go with.
And so some of this, we estimate a little over $25,000. That also would purchase, I believe, 5 full bunker gear kits.
Yeah, 5 sets of complete bunker gear, coat, helmet, boots, and pants.
Chief Lanning is also interested in increasing his outreach through some public education materials that could be used in the community and at events and that sort of thing. We also have in here recommendation to contract out for required testing of various things: pumps, aerial equipment, hoses, and self-contained breathing apparatus. About $5,600 to provide that. I believe, Chief, in some cases that has not been contracted out prior to this recommendation.
That is correct, and the biggest addition to that is gonna be the hose testing. Obviously, we can set a standard, but if we do this third party, it just alleviates and removes all liability off of us, the town, and the fire department. Would that hose rupture or wasn't tested to the right pressure, that third party will maintain that process for us.
How are you defining aerial equipment?
That-
How are you defining aerial
The ladder
equipment?
truck.
Our ladder
ladder
truck
truck.
has to have a sway test and a load test done on a yearly basis to ensure it's functionality.
Okay, and then we are recommending establishing a project fund for the station expansion project. This amount would allow us with potential land acquisition needs and some concept planning to start the road down within a few years, getting to that point. But this is funding to start that process. In Public Works,
Excuse me, let me interrupt you, Peter, before you go to Public Works. You're overlooking something that was established in our last year's previous budget. And I don't know if Chief Lanning has started the process, but they would get, one of the things that's not on here is the search, or beginning the search for a replacement vehicle for 753. So I didn't know if that was coming up later, or if that was something that got left out. But that's something that truck's 26 years old, and it either needs to be augmented by a new replacement pumper or replaced. So that may need to go in.
In conversations with Chief Lanning, you know, with the various needs out there, his priority was on the staffing.
Okay.
And so, you know, just based on all the needs, that's what led to our recommendation where it is. Of course, this is the board's budget to consider, but Chief Lanning, I don't know if you want to talk any more about the vehicles and the timing.
So kind of like Mr. Franzese had said, obviously there's three major issues, or I guess where we're kind of falling short within the fire station. One would be staffing, and ensuring again that fire truck leaves the station every time someone picks up the phone and calls 911. That's my first priority. And even, you know, this addition of the part-time staffing to a 24-hour basis is great, but we still have to keep in mind it's still going to only be part-time staff. The second in line with that obviously would be an engine. But I think with the property being for sale next door, it's kind of one of those things, if we didn't jump on it when it was available, we may never have the option for adequate expansion moving forward if somebody kind of grabbed that before we had the opportunity to. So.
Thank you. Any other questions on fire?
Yeah, so where does that stand in regards to the property next door?
I can give you an update on Thursday. Next.
And Mayor, I see a hand on the screen there.
Can you hear me? Yes. Yep. You can hear me pretty good?
Yes.
Just making sure everybody knew I was here. Alabama's so hot down here.
A little hot here too.
Make sure everybody knew I was here. Keep going on. If there's anything I need to say, I'll say it Thursday.
Thank you. Okay,
Can
and
you prove you're in Alabama?
That's still the same, ain't it? Make you say some bad words now.
That's good.
we're glad to see you safe and sound.
Roll tide. Thank you.
Be careful with that now.
So in Public Works, of course, the focus is on maintaining some of our core services that people identify with as, I think when you think about what Public Works provides, all of our services are important, but I think people are, especially when it comes to their weekly garbage collection, that is something that when towns don't get that right, we hear about it quickly. And so we're maintaining our services while preparing for what's to come with the American Recovery Plan funding. I think there's, of course, that's going to be a whole separate discussion for the community and the board to have. But I believe there's a great potential there in terms of infrastructure investment and what that funding may do. So that's going to be a key focus.
So I do have a question on our revenue recognition. I know you talked about creating a separate fund to track that totally separately, which I think is the right decision. We have not shown that though in this budget, but do we need to go ahead and show it knowing we know what the allotment's going to be and we know we're going to get half of that in this upcoming fiscal year?
It's, you know, it's almost in a way not going through the operating budget in its entirety. So we may receive it, but we're not going to necessarily spend it in this coming year. We have to plan out how we might spend it over time. And so, well, I've heard that we'll have up to as far as 2026, I believe, 2024 to obligate it, and a few years beyond that to spend it. And so, it's still a little abstract to me to, you know, for us to program any certain amount. Now that can be handled through the budget amendment process once we're ready to know what we're going to program in the coming year, which we'll certainly program something in. That's where a budget amendment would come in, where we would recognize that into the budget, into the operating budget.
The paperwork. No, but the paperwork has been submitted. I did get that in by the 18th that they had requested. And so, that piece has been done. I know they'll allocate so much at one point and then allocate the rest at a later date.
But it's
So I haven't
certainly,
seen the numbers yet.
it's going to be a unique opportunity for Spencer and everyone else to really discern what's the best use of this funding. And so I think we're all in a once in a lifetime moment, really, to have this coming towards us. The next thing to note in Public Works, planning exterior maintenance at the library, which we'll mention in a moment when I talk about the library, but also another vehicle replacement, a pickup truck replacement, and we have some enhanced maintenance funding in our recreation budget, thanks to the Standback Forest endowment that has been set up. We estimate in the coming year it'll be $4,500 to $5,000 or so that we can expect to receive. There's actually about that amount that I believe we received within the last few weeks
Yes.
for the current year, and so about March or April of each year is what they said they would be providing us the proceeds from the endowment. So we programmed that amount into the maintenance in the recreation budget. At the library, a few highlights.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Planning the exterior maintenance. I know you're getting ready to talk about that.
Mhm.
Is our crew gonna do the work at the library?
So the maintenance needs at the library are, my understanding of it is, when the renovation work happened, the big renovation work happened, there was oil-based paint used, which apparently has presented a problem. A lot of mold, mildew type things that you could clean it off and it'll come right back within a few months. And so this maintenance is about basically scraping all of the exterior paint and then putting a latex paint. Now, it is not that this amount does not include the windows. The windows themselves are having their own separate issues with the glazing. And the recommendation is, I believe, there's 20 sets of 3 windows, and we could either spend about $2,500 a set to do that same type of painting to them, or we could spend about $3,500 to replace them with a vinyl window that would be historically appropriate and has been used frequently in other area buildings. And so that would be a future phase to handle the windows, but this would be the first phase of exterior painting of along the roof areas, the railings, doors, and those sorts of things.
And I don't know if y'all, when we had our event up there, if you noticed the soffit area around the roof line.
It's in bad shape.
Yeah.
It's in bad shape. And it's my understanding, the windows on the outside are the original ones, and didn't they kind of go inside the windows and put some kind of vinyl or something?
I believe there's a storm window of sorts.
To keep the look of, so.
But I think that maybe is providing some better insulation value there, but the windows themselves are in need of both the glazing issue and the paint issue, and that if you kept working on the same windows every 5 to 10 years, you'd have to spend the amount to deal with the maintenance. If you went ahead and switched them, then it would solve the issue in the long run.
From an energy efficiency standpoint, long-term maintenance, and I think the key is as long as you can get a window that's historically accurate, it's somewhat of a no-brainer. But down the road, next year's budget.
Well, it could be over multiple years, because to do all the windows, it would be about $70,000. So it depends, it could be paced out. Joel was getting some estimates on, well, do you lose a lot of money if you spread it out? Is there a lot of mobilization costs involved that you pay each time, or not necessarily? And so he's getting more information on that.
The reality is, as long as it's taking windows to come in, you can plan it for this budget year, but it would probably be the next before they
I'll
come
get
in.
it 2 years later. Very true. I got a second question. With the future expansion of the Standback Park, would Joe have enough employees to take care of that?
You know, that's a good question. I think, the short answer is yes for now. I think as things continue in general, maybe beyond, maybe the forest is somewhat of a low impact in terms of maintenance. I think as we start to add other recreation amenities, maybe where the staffing issues come along.
And one of the concepts that we've kind of talked about, just, I mean, not in detail, but, you know, at some point, we're gonna hit critical mass with public works relative to all of our greenways and parks and everything. And at that point, it may be worth looking into some type of small parks and recreation department.
That's,
Yeah.
yeah, one time we did have that. It had more regulation as far as for the kids and everything.
Right.
Which is good.
Right, and I mean, that would be a case where the Eighth Street ballpark would fall under that
Sure.
as well.
Yeah. Needs to be updated.
You know, I'd love to see us get to the point that we need that.
I would too.
Yeah.
But we gotta build a tax base as far as I guess. All right, I have a third question, sir.
Okay.
Hit y'all one time. Joel has not put in his budget. He's got a backhoe, a small backhoe that has hydraulic links. Every time he gets it out, it needs more fluid than it's worth. And that needs to be replaced. I don't know if he mentioned that to you or not.
You know, I need to, unfortunately, Joel's not able to be with us tonight. He's having a family issue. But we can ask him about some more
I think
feedback
that's
on
something
that.
we'll have to address in the very near future. He's got a big backhoe, and that's good for tax. Sometimes you need a smaller backhoe and you got it secondhand and talking to their maintenance people. That's stuff I think we're gonna have to look at in the future as far as updating the smaller backhoe for this department.
Now, I do know that the current year budget, I believe, included, go back to the current year budget, which you first heard about a year ago. It talks about, okay, that was about mowers, frontline mowers. So, I don't recall hearing about whether these, mowers were replaced this year or not. It could have happened before my arrival, but I was trying to figure out if that was something that was identified in the current year budget or not.
So, I guess maybe a question for Joel in between now and next week when we reconvene is, what's more important, a small backhoe replacement or our program vehicle replacement for the
Yeah.
truck that he has programmed?
Mm-hmm.
That's his decision, but I do think it's something that needs to be addressed in the future.
I think I know what truck it is, and it's in need of replacement.
I'm not stressing that, but I'm stressing the.
But we need to add it to the list, just like
It's
our,
just-
our
like I said, I
engine
think it's
fire
something
department.
Just like
Yep.
the fire department needs fire trucks. I think he needs a little help on that in the future as well.
Okay, so if it's okay, we talked some about the library already. The other new item in the library budget, which is not an enormous amount, but we've programmed $1,650 to add secure public internet access and printing stations. So a computer of sorts that somebody could come in and use to access the internet, apply for jobs, do that sort of thing, and then also print something if they need to. And of course, the printing would be, we have printing costs within our fee schedule, but the that would be what that amount is trying to accomplish. It also would include the software necessary to keep it secure, keep people from using the computer in ways we wouldn't want them to, and that sort of thing, and keep it separate from the rest of the network.
Is that enough money for that?
That's the estimate we've received. Yep. So that is the general fund highlights. In terms of the Powell Bill, we've talked a little bit about the decline in Powell Bill revenues and the additional vehicle tax. So as a whole, we're recommending a Powell Bill of about $102,000 with a consistent level with the operating accounts in that, in terms of maintenance, and about 54,000 budgeted in capital outlay. Our pavement evaluation process that's getting ready to kick off will help us establish a priority for how we would use that capital outlay budget. And so, again, in total, the budget, total recommendation for the general fund is about $3.7 million, and about 102,000 for the Powell bill, totaling for all funds of $3,823,684. And so, my budget message in this concludes with talking about challenges and opportunities for the future. And I've talked about a number of the strides that the town has made over the current years. We've also had challenges, but through that, the Board of Aldermen has provided an exciting vision for the future, and we've done some wonderful things in terms of supporting staff over the last few years, which is certainly appreciated. We're soon going to experience the benefit of our new town hall and police department, and there's needs out there for Spencer and everyone else that are greater than the resources. The next step from here is to continue these discussions with a capital improvement plan, and that is something we will focus on more in the coming months. That will allow us to further identify and prioritize our needs and align them with funding mechanisms. And again, I've talked a little bit about the federal dollars from the American Rescue Plan, and how the timing of that, I think, actually aligns well with the need for doing this capital improvement planning work, and help us work together and work with the community to discern how to best use our local resources, but also state resources, federal resources, and even philanthropic resources. And so I would like to conclude this presentation by, again, thanking the entire staff leadership team and those who assisted them in putting their budget requests together, and for working together to put this proposal together. I'm going to read from the book because I like the way I said this, and I'm just going to say it again. Our entire team does incredible work and service to this community, and it is humbling to distill their efforts down to the dollars and cents required. And it's also appropriate to give thanks to our citizens who continue to work with you, the elected officials, our boards and commissions, and our staff to provide direction and feedback so we can improve the quality of life. And my final note, we've talked about the schedule going forward. This is the budget I'm proposing to you. It's neither final, nor is it a necessarily reflection of what will be approved by the Board of Aldermen. I thank you all for your review of these, and so you can arrive at what you consider the proper expenditures of available revenues for the coming year.
Thank you very much.
All
You
right.
did a good job. You got a good staff.
We have a great staff here.
You took all the fun out of it. I was actually gonna go in here and question some of the math to question whether it was really balanced or not, but you've done such a good job presenting it. I wasn't gonna do that.
Exactly the same thing.
Well, did you check the math?
I haven't yet, but I will.
Okay, please do. Please do.
I have a question about, investment earnings, because in the last couple of years, we've had some pretty good investment earnings, but
Oh,
this
yes,
year,
sir, yeah.
the budget here is a recommendation where, like, we had 10,800, for this year, and the recommendation is for 1,000. Are we pulling money out of everything that we had invested, or?
It's just the overall general interest rates are low right now. And that's across the board. That's at the bank, and then even at the North Carolina trust management that we have, they're even low. It's just part of the economy right now. Interest rates just aren't high. And so I went real conservative on that number because of that. I just kind of looked at what we had earned this year and, kind of base that number on kind of what we have gotten in this year. And just listening to the future forecast, I didn't want to go real high on investment earnings simply because, they're just not really paying anything right now.
Like last year, we were concerned about tax revenue. I think everybody this year is concerned about what the stock market's gonna do.
Yes, exactly.
And interest rates. Any other questions at this point? Have time on Thursday of next week to ask plenty more. All right. Well, thank you all very much. Board, we will plan to reconvene next Thursday for our pre-agenda meeting. We'll also use that as a working session for the budget to talk through any questions that we might have. And again, then the following Tuesday night, at our regular board meeting, we will have our public hearing, at which time, anytime after that public hearing, whether it's that Tuesday or at a later date in June, we can take action to approve a fiscal year 21-22 budget anytime before the end of June.
And as a reminder, there is another meeting coming up on Tuesday, June 1st at 6 p.m., right, Kyle?
Yes.
For a public hearing related to the Spencer Development Ordinance.
Anything else? All right, with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Morgan, all in favor? All opposed? All right, we stand adjourned.